generative AI, whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's Grok or whatever, those things are bullshit artists.
I'll say that, man, when I'm looking for a job, I feel like I'm competing against another country that has sent their agents to my country so that we could compete for a position in Miami or Chicago.
Hmm.
And it's an uncomfortable subject, but I'm
Yeah,
calling it out.
backlog, if you will, of things to be built, jobs to be made, things to be created, and so on and so forth is so large that even with that influx, right, there's still so much that can be done software wise. There's still so much that can be built
I agree
software
with
wise.
you.
Yo, hey, we are live. How's it going, Scott?
It's been a long time.
I know, right? And ironically, not ironically, like this is like episode 30 of this show. Milestone, right?
Yeah. What's up with me?
Yeah.
Mm, worth the contract. Contract ended. Not sure how long it's going to be for me to get my next assignment. I have a history of like 6 and 8 months of in between assignments. So I've been aggressively pursuing Azure certification, specifically AZ 204. I made that declaration approximately 3 days ago, and I've just been on it, and I've learned a lot, and I'm overwhelmed and excited at the same time.
Nice, nice.
It
Um,
created some light bulbs in regards to generative AI and a new way of working as a solutions architect. And yeah, that's what's going on with me. What about you?
well, well, for me, it's been mostly work. I spent close to 1 year, trying to understand what the systems that we have at work is and stuff like that, and getting used to the team and figuring things out. And I think now I'm on some kind of momentum. I've gained a lot of momentum. So yeah, pretty much same old, same old.
Yeah, isn't it nice when there are times at work where like you feel like you're set and now you could just go into autopilot and not
Right.
always stress about being inadequate and never delivering on what you think you should be delivering to, like in regards to, you know what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, that's the best feeling in the world, right? The best feeling in the world is, a discussion comes up at work, a challenge comes up at work, and not only do you understand what they are talking about, but you can also see the solution clearly, right? And it's just a matter of, banging on the keyboard or drawing things out or, doing whatever. So, happiness to me at work is whenever I am doing something that is challenging enough to get me engaged, but not too difficult that I start to despair, right? Because when you have a task that is like, you don't even have the tools to even begin to think about the problem, right? That's when despair sets in, and that's when the job just becomes so painful.
Yep. Well, congrats on that sense of accomplishment where you can relax a little bit, but still deliver.
Yeah, true, true. And for me, isn't it's not just about like relaxing a little bit, it's also that now have my I can have an effect in the workplace, right? Like I can make a ding in the universe, according to Steve Jobs, right? Like I have the opportunity to make changes and effect changes and push things through now because I have an understanding of the system. I have the ability to get stuff done, to make a difference. I think that's the part of working in a company or any company for that matter that is actually interesting and makes you want to wake up on Monday morning and go to work, right? The other feeling is the one that is so terrible, where you're given like mountains of tasks. You don't even have the knowledge or the tools to go about the task. and you're just confused out of the jump, like what to do about this, and then deadlines are coming and ugh.
Yeah, and the expectation is you got to learn a technology on your own time
Hmm.
while you're trying to maintain a household and have other obligations.
True, true.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
So there's a topic that I want to talk about because I feel like it's multi-dimensional.
Okay.
Certifications.
Hmm.
It's interesting on so many facets, from race to, yes, I'm calling it out,
Mhm.
to compensation expectations, to, oh man, I've been doing it all wrong since I've been studying the Microsoft recommendations for how to solve these business cases or requirements. Just a whole bunch, just a bag of mixed emotions. Which one you want me to
Mm.
start with first?
Let's start from the most technical, then go back to the yeah. So let's start with the mixed emotions due to the recommendations from Microsoft.
Okay. All right. So AZ 204 certification.
Hmm.
AZ is Azure, right?
Yeah.
It's uh it's developer centric,
Okay.
which is different from maybe a administrator or a DevOps person.
Hmm.
And I mean, I started my Azure journey approximately 4 years ago
Okay.
because a couple people nudged me in that direction, and I'm like, you know what? They're right. I can't survive off of this WPF
Mm.
or Xamarin. So yeah, this seems like the next logical step for me to try to stay relevant. So that was a strategic move on my part. Um, and so, I started working on, passion projects. And then I started knowing enough about business cases because my passion project was a real world business case. And I convinced employers to hire me as an architect, right? A
Hmm.
hybrid between domain and solutions. And I already had experience with Azure Service Bus the way I've been doing it. And I had experience with some experience with Azure Blob Storage, some experience with, I don't know, there's a couple other technologies that I can't think of off the top of my head because Service Bus was the most complicated. Oh, Azure Key Vault, etc.
Hmm.
And I did the best with the knowledge that I had, right? So then I make my declaration like when I'm wrapping up my current contract, I'm like, man, if I'm going to be like sitting on the bench for the next 6 months, looking for my next lucrative contract, I might as well like just get a certification and hopefully expedite the time that I'm expedite the time for me to get my next job. I don't know how to
Mm.
articulate that any differently. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just started digging in. I bought some course training material. Went on Azure or Microsoft Azure's like learning module or website. They call it Learning Paths. That consists of different modules. And I'm going to use your word, an epiphany. I'll probably still butcher that. Where the the Microsoft or the Azure way of doing things really appears to be very functional plug and play, where they have event grid and uh, function apps and service bus, and they have these bindings and these triggers, also with blob storage, and they all appear to have certain features that the Azure solution suite of services can push the result of each of those programs. Also forgot Azure Logic apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
It appears that at a very high level, as I'm going through my training material for this certification, it appears that like Azure was designed for developers to really run the service, run data through one service, and the product or output of that service with the data given to it can just be bound to another Azure service
Mm-hmm.
that executes. The result of that can be bound to another Azure service, and that's what I'm starting to realize. And I'm like, holy crap, man! This whole Beach Mobile solution that I built, that I've been praising myself for, man, I wrote so much redundant code that probably only a third of it was needed. But
Mm.
who would know unless you really go through the certification, which I believe expresses the intent of the cloud provider
Mm-hmm.
versus us just trying to make it work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing as well is people tend to overestimate the ability to understand certain concept or use certain things. So for example, you see it happen all the time where people just check they don't even read the manual, right? Once they buy the item, they're like, ah, yeah, I can assemble it. And you carry that attitude towards the cloud, and then you will run into a lot of trouble because without a deep understanding or without properly reading what the makers intended for, like latency figures, storage capacity, pricing, things like that. You see it happen all the time where software architects essentially just what's the right word, they essentially just hack together a solution without really understanding what are the trade-offs, what are the benefits, in what ways can you use this particular piece of technology, and things like that. So yeah, that idea of just jumping in to the Azure portal and just selecting this, selecting that, and assembling a system together isn't it is not sustainable in the long run, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's part one of my dissertation of my Azure cert journey. Now we transition into segment two. I'm gonna use your word. I had a epiphany. I can't say the word. My chosen word is revelation, but
Oh wow.
you
Okay.
tend
Yeah,
to say
it's
epiphany.
kind of, yes, it's the same thing. Epiphany. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had this epiphany
Hmm.
where I'm like, hold up. From this, from what I've learned about each of these Azure services or cloud apps,
Hmm.
and they're kind of like function chaining from one to another to another to another. Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, hold up. What if ultimately, if my goal, which is a very loose goal, it's like a 10% chance I'll pursue it, is to get the Azure Solutions Architect certification.
Hmm.
What if, since all the learning documentation or the training documentation is already on the internet and backed up by third party uh, training organizations,
Hmm.
what if generative AI can be trained off of all the learning material for each of the Azure products? And what if I could outsource my solutions architecture, given a business case, to an AI agent or a generative AI machine, in which I feed it the business case, the business objectives. I might give it some hints on uh, the data that needs to be saved, the actors that participate, hence customer, supplier, courier, things to that like. And with all the training content that's already on the World Wide Web, maybe a solutions architect role isn't as complicated today or maybe in 12 months as it was last year. And
Mm.
what once took maybe 4 weeks, 8 weeks to provide a comprehensive plan strategy with a whole bunch of architectural diagrams and network diagrams, maybe all that could be done and triaged within like 48 hours. Hence, it probably takes maybe half an hour to feed it the case study,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you get back the the solutions architecture and the reasoning behind it from we'll say ChatGPT,
Mm-hmm.
the the rest of the time you're just reviewing and making alterations and then maybe feeding it again with pockets that you didn't include uh, in the previous prompt. So that was a revelation that I had. I'll pause.
Um, I think I think you're right. I think the question is, I even think that Chat GPT as it exists today probably already has that capabilities, because you have to remember that all the documentation for all the cloud providers are already on the internet, right? And if Chat GPT was trained on all of the content on the internet, it probably already has that um, those capabilities, right? Um, that's one aspect to it. The second aspect is I don't. I feel like the cloud providers are currently working on this thing you just said heavily, right? I think Microsoft, Amazon, Google are already building what is essentially cloud software architects that have the context of all the entire account and are able to make recommendations and able to um, provision things and things like that. That's if they are, because we could sit here and be assuming that they are working on it, whereas maybe they are not even working on it at all. But I just feel like that's a logical step in that direction.
I mean, it would be so powerful that not only do you feed it a business case and some hints surrounding that business case of your expectations, and it provides you a solutions architecture and the various Azure services that are going to participate in delivering that solution and how it does it,
Mm,
but it also generates the Azure DevOps strategy.
mm,
It generates the ARM templates. It generates the whether you use CLI, PowerShell, Pulumi, Terraform. It spits out all that based on the solutions architecture that it
mhm,
already outputted to you, and that completely changes the concept of a calculator. You know, I
mm,
would I could tell my son back in my day we had a TI-89 and it could calculate, sine, cosine, tangent, and all these other formulas for my physics lab. But we would calculate and it would be for arithmetic or just mathematics.
mm,
Now we're able to calculate um, business solutions given requirements through a
mm.
machine. Who would have ever thought of that? I didn't, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's generative AI is a calculator beyond mathematics. It
Mhm.
calculates business results given requirements, or maybe results isn't the right word.
I think where generative
business
AI,
solutions given
yeah,
business requirements.
yeah, I think where generative AI is at the moment, right, is it's powerful enough to simulate what intuition looks like, right? So imagine the way I like to think about it is um generative AI, whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's Grok or whatever, those things are bullshit artists in the sense that you know how you could be, your mind could be somewhere else and someone is asking you a question and you're still giving coherent answers even though your mind is not there, or somebody asks a question and you are able to just cook up a solution, right? Or if so, or you're talking, maybe you don't really understand something, you just use words and make it sound believable, right? Or you you say things that maybe you're not really sure of, but you make it sound believable.
Or
That's
we call it
precisely what,
capping.
yeah, capping, exactly. That's precisely what all these generative AIs are doing, because unless you are at a certain, there, I can't tell you how many times I've asked Chat GPT, can you create code that does this for me? And it spits out this absolutely correct looking code. Then when I run it, I find out that a particular method doesn't exist, or a particular parameter doesn't exist, and the thing just puts it there just because it felt it looked right, right?
Hmm.
And it looked right enough to fool me, but it wasn't right enough to fool the compiler. So I still think that humans will still be useful, but unless we find a way of getting rid of those, should I say, confidence errors or capping, you know, you can't really rely on those things too much.
Yeah. What would be weird is if the compiler has generative AI built into it and
Hmm.
it infers what it needs in order to compile. It pulls
Mm,
packages, it generates code that then relies on the packages that it recommends and pulls down. I mean, it's a rabbit hole, right?
yeah,
But you
I
calculate
think
business solutions.
I think one way they could do it would be to train the AI on the error messages, right? So before the AI spits out an answer, it will get the opportunity to run, maybe not execute the code, but at least pass the code through some kind of Lexa or parser, just to validate that the tokens and the keys and all these tools are there. And if there are any errors, the AI knows, okay. So instead of you telling the AI the error and then the AI correcting it, it can do that, all of that upfront.
The other part that will be fascinating is it completely changes the game of the technique of test driven development. You're
True.
already, in this case, AI is going to provide its implementation to make the test pass.
Hmm.
And then as you write more tests, it does the refactoring and it keeps altering the implementation details to appease all the tests, targeting that system under test.
Mm,
It'll be interesting.
yeah.
I wish I was as smart in college as I am now. I didn't learn how to learn until like I would argue like 30.
Mm,
I'm a late bloomer.
yeah. I was kind of lucky though, um, in the sense that my dad, for the most part, was. Uh, I think I owe a lot of my mindset to the dude, because he used to sit me down and we would have these conversations, and he would guide my thinking, right? He wasn't the type to tell people how to think, right? Instead, he would come up with a counter example and just ask you as a question, and all of a sudden you go, I didn't think of that, stuff like that. So I was lucky in that regard. So when I was still in secondary school, which would be like high school also, I think it's even less than high school, but when I was still in secondary school, um, I remember having multiple conversations with him, and I knew that like computers and software was going to change the world and all of that, but I had no idea. you know, how profound that change was going to be, right? Looking back, it looks obvious, but back then, it wasn't really clear. My mom at the time was like, oil company, my son will work in oil company,
Hmm.
you know. But look at it today. Where are the oil companies? They aren't the top companies anymore. The top companies today are, software companies. So yeah, I think it even goes down to like advice for parents as well. You are training your children to live in a world that you can't anticipate. So don't assume that the rules of your current world is going to apply to your son or to your daughter. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, let's segment.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the next segment? What do you want to talk about?
Still related to certifications,
Hmm.
but I couldn't help but acknowledge the elephant in the room. I'm not white, so I can say it. Man, a lot of the training content,
Hmm.
a lot of the videos, uh, not even about training, but just within the ecosystem of should I get a certification? What are the expectations? Is driven is driven by Indian culture. All right. Notice how I appended culture to it to not sound like weird. Um, but it's driven by the Indian community,
Hmm.
and I can't help but say, wow, like they are. This culture is all over AWS. They're all over Azure. And then I was like, man, in Black culture, they dangle footballs and basketballs in front of their young, and they say you make a lot of money fetching those balls. In Indian culture, I mean, I'm not really tight with with any Indian people. Do their parents dangle Azure or what is you call Google Cloud Platform or AWS in front of their children? Like this is what success looks like. Ready, set, go, and then they all just attack, 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 and they're just explain to me if you know, because I don't know.
I can explain.
All right.
It's okay. It's a mixture of several factors, but let's start from the very beginning. Um, First of all, it's not just Indians, right? It's all immigrants in general, people from third world countries, because those countries aren't as liberal as the US or the UK or Europe or the Western world. Um, the the parent those cultures are very strict. So when parents are raising their children, right, they are raised around academic performance, read very well, study very well. um, you're going to be a doctor, case closed, right? You couldn't tell your dad, no, I want to do my own thing. No, whatever your dad told you to do is what you are going to do. And they, as far as they are concerned, my child is going to study medicine, my child is going to be a doctor, etc., etc. So understand that there is a lot of those countries like what they call it, uh, immigrant countries, like countries that aren't that rich to begin with. They don't have that freedom to choose whatever um, um, profession they want, right? There is usually doctor, lawyer, and so on and so forth. What just happened was that recently we added software engineer to it. So when a particular person from that community becomes a software engineer, becomes successful, comes back to the country, the parents see that, oh, this guy has money. The children are immediately told you have to learn software so you can be like uncle this or auntie that, right? Um, that's one aspect of it. The second aspect was there was actually a legit push from the Indian government. I think that was in the 90s or so, around pushing, you know, um, 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 pushing them into getting into IT, right? Getting into software. So
In the
because of it,
90s,
yeah, yeah, it was in the 90s. It took a while.
I mean, the internet was barely like mainstream
Hmm.
in even in '94.
Okay, maybe it was not the
Two,
90s. Maybe it was
you
in
think
the
about the
2000s.
dot com burst,
Yeah,
that was like 2000, 2001.
True, true. So maybe not the 90s, maybe in the 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe it was in the 2000s. But I do know there was a push from them,
I think
and that
the
push
dot
led,
com burst. I think it was 98.
yeah,
Whatever.
98. Yeah. So i- China had already dominated manufacturing, right? They had already conquered manufacturing. Everybody was, by if anybody who wanted anything manufactured would go to China. So I think India saw it as okay, since we are not going to dominate that, we could look at doing software, which is also the reason why you notice that they have a lot of like female engineers. There are a lot of um females in the Indian females in IT, and that's because there was a encouragement from those governments to, push their employees into sorry, say employees, push their citizens into looking at IT. And if you look at, there are many schools in India, for example, that teach IT. So you are seeing the result of years of policy changes, societal changes, family changes, and things like that. And that's what you are getting. And the thing with momentum is that it's not going to stop anytime soon. It's also the reason Nigerians are known for 419, for example. In fact, 419 is the official code for fraud in Nigeria, but it became a international it became an international thing because what happened was a few people started it, became successful, right? Showed off their wealth. Younger boys growing up saw those older men make money that way, and they now entered into, which also brought them into the game, and those guys made even more money. And you see how it starts to shape the society, right? Because a lot of the checks and balances in the society were removed. So one of the checks and balances was if you got money through illicit means in the past, right? You were frowned upon, you were ostracized by the community, regardless of how much money you have. But because of westernization, some of those stigma was removed, which meant that even more and more of our young people went into fraud and all of that, which is unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that will be another interesting conversation because I'm like, all right, well, how come with black culture, the money gets seen, people flock to drugs and entertainment, hence uh, sports and singing or rapping, and but
Because
then
that's
all the other cultures they're like, oh, STEM or
yeah,
law or
yeah.
that's sustainable, that's lifelong, like.
No. So take black
Damn it! Why
culture.
are we so short-sighted, man? I know the
No,
answer.
but
It's
but
because we're
again, look
products
at
of
it. Take
single-parent
black culture. Take black
families
culture.
that have no men in the household. What's up?
Yeah. So like I'm saying, take black culture for example. If you grew up in a neighborhood, right, where everybody's poor, etc., and then your neighbor gets into music or starts rapping and he makes a lot of money from it, and he comes back to the same hood where you guys are from, right? The children there are seeing this person. Oh, he's a rapper. Oh, this is what rappers are like. They start to idolize that lifestyle, right? Because there is a it's almost like a feedback mechanism. There's a reward in the system for idolizing. It's also the same reason why you see uh, uh, um, young black boys wanting to play basketball because they've seen what it's like for people to be in the NBA, have so much money, influence, not realizing that there isn't enough jobs in the NBA to even hire, I don't know, 1/10 of 1% or something of the
Yeah,
people there.
nor is it sustainable to take care of you for the remainder of your life.
True.
It's like for whatever reason, and again, it's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But when you remove the man from the household, that whose one of its core traits is discipline,
Mm-hmm.
and you remove that person from the household, what happens? A lack of long term strategic planning. People
Mm,
that aren't trained to be disciplined, but instead they react emotionally, and then
Mm.
becoming 14% of the population, but make up 70% of the U.S. prison system. Like that's a separate topic, but like I'm envious that another culture can just do so well, and then I look at my culture and I'm like, what the?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I again, so black people are going to hate me for this, but I don't
oh,
care.
you're African, so it's a different culture, right?
Yes, but
So, like you guys, I would think stronger household, have a more incentive to represent the family name. I don't know. You could correct me.
mhm.
Us Americans, no, we're broken, dude.
Yeah. So the reason I'm very very reluctant in saying this is that I there's this you and I, right? We are close, we know each other, we are very good friends. So when we talk, right, we see each other for who we are, right? But in my interactions with other black Americans, right, there's an animosity there because it feels like I'm judging them. I don't know if that makes any sense. Whenever I'm talking about this same topic you're talking about. So um like there was one that somebody was saying that Africans shouldn't use the N word because we're like white people. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? We are like white people, really? Like,
Yeah,
anyway,
I never considered that, but I think I could. I think I could understand the reasoning for it, but whatever.
anyway, so yeah,
Yeah,
and I was not trying to explain that. Look, we are literally the same race, right? We have the same DNA, and it's not coincidence. We like to think of slavery as something that happened in the 2,000 years ago. No, it was like two people away, 140 years, something like that. That was the time slavery ended till now. So that's not enough time to say that Africans in America and Africans from the continent of Africa are two separate, two disparate people that are totally unconnected, and one is closer to white people. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I told you this, but when I was doing an interview, right, they flew some people to Nigeria to come and like interview us and everything. They were all Americans. And I saw someone that looked like my auntie. I swear to God, I was like, yeah, this person is not just is definitely Nigerian, this person is related to me. But the moment I spoke to her, I now realized that no, she's
have nothing in common with her.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. But that shock, I remember that shock. That shock spoke to me in a way that I don't think people really get is that we are not that different. We have the same problems. We are seeing the same way. The only thing is probably our accent and our culture.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So if we could circle back to Indian culture as it
hmm
relates to tech,
yeah.
I'm gonna call it out. What's it called? What's that acronym? Is it H1B? H1? What is that? Within the
Um,
United States, the visas for
it's
employment,
H1B visa now, right? Yeah, that's it. H1B.
H1B. And
Yeah.
so my YouTube feed, like maybe 10% of it is videos on woe is me. It's so hard to get a job in tech. A lot of it is for junior developers,
Mm,
which is understandable. But then also uh, peers, peer developers, they're
hmm
like, man, like the compensation for development is going down, and there's a number of people that have that sentiment, and it's kind of difficult not to connect that to who's making up a sizable pool of the workforce here in the states.
mm,
I've been on floors. I've been at PricewaterhouseCoopers, FedEx. I've been at corporations and where damn near their entire floor is or filled with Indians, right?
mm.
Not Indian Americans, but like
Just
people that
Indian.
through the
Yeah.
accent, it's obvious that they came from like the motherland of India, right?
hmm
And so one can't help but acknowledge that what's going on, and is this a new reality for American workers? I'm not sure if other countries like Australia, Great Britain, China, I'm not sure if it's distributed all over,
Hmm.
but I'll say that, man, when I'm looking for a job, I feel like I'm competing against another country that has sent their agents to my country so that we could compete for a position in Miami or Chicago.
Hmm.
And it's an uncomfortable subject, but I'm
Yeah.
calling it out because
Mm.
it needs to be discussed somewhere, and it seems like it's being discussed privately.
So again, like I think I've said this before, but if you're one in a million, then there's around 2,000 of you in China, just on the sheer numbers, right? There are 2,000 of your kind in China. There's like 1,007 or 1,008 of your kind in India. So even if 1% of India um, decides to go into IT, 1%, that's still 10
And
million people.
we said that was 10 million, right?
Yeah,
If
that's
there's a
still 10.
billion,
Exactly. So that's still 10 million people. So you have to understand
of
that.
course, you have to take into consideration the demographic. It's over the age of like 18,
Uh-huh.
under the age of 60. But
Mhm.
yeah, we get the point.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like,
So that's one aspect to it. The second aspect is, like I told you, their government made a concerted effort, and they push to get most of their population into IT. And yeah,
but
it's
how is that
worked.
serving them if they're in the United States getting that money and paying taxes to the United States? How is that working for the Indian government?
Oh, okay, I will give you a classic example, right? Take me. I was in Nigeria earning Nigerian wages. I became good enough that I was relocated to Canada. I'm in Canada now. And even though I'm here and I'm paying taxes to the Canadian government, which helps the Canadian government, because trust me, if you see, last time I saw my pay slip, I was just weeping because the tax
The amount of
I'm
taxes they
working for
took out.
them. The taxes on me
Oh,
is
so
just
you're still paying taxes in Nigeria?
no, no, no. I'm not paying taxes in Nigeria, but I'm saying that, like, even though I'm earning money here in Canada, right? That my pay slip is like I'm working for the Canadian government, so it's benefiting the Canadian government,
This is
right?
why I go corp to corp instead of W two.
I know,
But
right?
my question still persists.
So the answer, that's what I'm getting at. But
Okay.
I am constantly sending money back home, and that's the important bit here, right? I'm constantly sending money back home to my parents, to my family. We still have family houses. We still have projects we are doing. So they are benefiting. The Nigerian government is benefiting every time I send money back
They're
home.
taxing what? Because there's like universal sales tax. Like,
No,
how is that money getting back to the government? How's it
because
paying for roads, hospitals, etc.?
exactly, because every time I change Canadian dollars to naira, right, the naira gets stronger. The naira can now buy more things. You see how it works?
Uh, I think that's one example.
Yeah.
Yes,
So that's one way.
I don't think that's the sole reason that a
No,
government that a
see,
source government benefits from outsourcing their labor.
they do. See, here's the thing, right? The Indians relocating to the US is just, it's not the original goal, but it's just a byproduct of it. Okay. And there, like for example, Nigeria makes a good amount of money from inflows, right? From inflows of Nigerians in diaspora. The government makes money that way. But aside from that, they also they also have cheap labor in terms of building software. And then there are companies that buy those software from Indian companies too.
So, yeah, so you just reminded me, right?
Yeah.
And so we're going to pivot off of that.
Okay.
When I said that, like the compensation is lower, people
Hmm.
believe or have the perception that the compensation is lower compared to the good old days, like
Hmm.
5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And logically, to me, it makes sense
Hmm.
when there is an influx. of people from another country on H-1Bs or whatever that acronym is,
Mm-hmm.
and they're obviously getting paid a lower rate than
Mm-hmm.
their native counterparts, hence the nationals, Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And so companies are going to pay them maybe a third less than what they would pay normal wages to a national based on their cost of living.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is with the H-1B visa that you have a specific amount of time in between assignments to hurry up and get employment or else you got to go,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
don't know if it's 60 days, I don't know if it's 90 days, but I know it's not that long.
Mm-hmm.
And so lowered compensation is a perception. Uh, a lot of us feel like that we're literally competing with an entire country for a job, and
Mm.
you can't help but ignore the elephant in the room of course someone would be willing to work at a lower rate,
Mm-hmm.
hourly rate,
Mm-hmm.
yearly salary,
Mm-hmm.
if it means that they can stay in the states based on everything that they already have in the states, their family, their friends, whatever that they're doing on the side, their relationships. They would be starting, some would be starting over, or it would be a huge disruption for after their first work stint to go back home.
Mm.
So it's only natural that they would take a pay cut at the expense of their competition being unemployed and waiting longer on the bench. And that's the logic that I put together if you're following.
Yeah.
Do you follow?
Yeah, I follow.
Okay.
Um, it's what's the right word now? Even the economics of it, right, favors those people you talked about, because if they are working remote, for example, and they are being paid, I don't know, $50,000 per year, for example, that's way too low for a software engineer here. But by the time you exchange it, you find out that you can get, actually you can live decently with that kind of money in somewhere like India, for example. So it's actually unfair to the native populace um of the United States, like people like you who are trying to get jobs, who live here, who pay taxes here, etc., etc. But one thing that I also want you to consider as well is that I think here's an alternate explanation, okay? An alternate point of view. I think that from a software perspective, right? There's so much, the backlog, if you will, of things to be built, jobs to be made, things to be created, and so on and so forth, is so large that even with that influx, right, there's still so much that can be done software wise. There's still so much that can be built
I agree
software
with
wise.
you. It
Yeah.
just means that folks such as myself, instead of blaming the system or blaming people that don't resemble us,
Hmm.
we just step it up, man
Yeah.
up, and get with the program.
Hmm.
Um, Stop crying, "Woe is me." Accept reality for what it is,
Hmm.
and get better and show
Yeah.
up. And all this stems again from me going on this journey of getting this Azure certification or chasing this Azure certification and seeing who are the content creators for this Azure certification is the country of India. So
Yeah.
that's why this whole topic came up.
Yeah, I again, like I said, it's really a case of there was a push. So first of all, I gave two main explanations. One was the sheer numbers of it. If you were to line up all the software developers together and put them in a stadium, for example, that's assuming they could fit a stadium, you find out that a good portion of that stadium is mostly Indians, right? So it just makes sense that there are more, most of the tutorials you're seeing are of Indians. Also, you have to also consider as
The
well, and this
black
is very,
engineers were in the dugout.
yeah. So something else you need to consider as well is that, who do you think needs those certifications more, you or the average software engineer in India? Who do you think needs the certifications more?
They
It's
do.
them, right?
Well,
Because they have to prove.
them and fresh out of college. I don't even. That's another argument that we can archive for another episode.
Okay.
Is what how ChatGPT has invalidated CIS degrees if academia is 10 years behind industry.
Hmm.
Separate episode.
Separate episode. Yeah,
But yeah,
but
it benefits foreigners.
yeah. So, but the argument I'm putting here is that companies are willing to take you with your, which university did you go to? University of Florida.
Cleveland State University.
Okay, Cleveland State University. Employers respect Cleveland State University way more than they will respect, say, Benson outside University in
New Delhi.
Nigeria, in
New Delhi
Delhi or
State.
whatever. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So those guys need those certifications more than you. So that's part of the reason why they're probably the ones taking the highest number of certifications, and they're probably the ones searching for videos on those certifications, and they have to make those certification videos. You see how it all forms
Yeah,
a
it
kind
makes
of
sense.
market. Yeah. So
All right, that's our episode.
yeah, that's
It's
it.
very
So
sensitive. YouTube is going to block us.
yeah, I hope not. I hope not. Anyway, if you loved this episode, give it a like, a thumbs up. Let us know what you thought about the topics. And yeah, anything you have to say, Scott?
We'll pump out another episode on academia today, computer science degrees today, um, in regards to generative AI and how the
Hmm.
system is now broke. We'll pump that video out in 6 months. So.
That's yeah, yeah. All right. Bye.